Welcome to another episode of InRange. I'm doing something I haven't done in a long time, and that is a Q&A. I sort of stopped doing them because, frankly, I wasn't getting a lot of questions that were already not answered before, and engagement wasn't what it was. But at the same time, I recently saw a thread on Reddit and on Patreon subsequently of people who really said they loved the Q&As, and for some reason, the Q&As was part of the reason they decided to support the channel. So I think it's time to do another one. You can see we've got a heck of a lot of questions here. And what I'm going to do going forward is I'm going to do Q&As quarterly, so once every 3 months. But I'm going to change how I'm doing them. This will be a public one for all of you out there that are watching. But subsequent Q&As, at least I'm going to try this. I think it makes sense to me. One way to get more diversity of questions and a more interesting conversation going is to just open up the Q&A to any topic you want to talk about. So, of course, guns, firearms, history will be probably the predominant questions. But what I'm going to do is turn it into a Patreon perk. So people at $5 and above can ask the questions, and anyone that's a Patreon supporter, $1 and above, will get access to the Q&A, but I'm going to post them only on Patreon. But what we're going to do is open the door to any conversation you want. So think of it as like a Ask Me Anything via Q&A, quarterly, and Patreon supported. So going forward, if you're a Patreon supporter at 5 and above, you're going to be solicited for questions quarterly for my Q&A. And if you're a Patreon at any level, you'll be able to see them when I post them. And hopefully that'll be a way to build more community and to be thankful for all of you all that all y'all that support me via this project, because as you know, without you there isn't InRange. There's no monetization from YouTube. We have no sponsors. It's truly direct viewer support that keeps this channel alive. So thank you for that. And with that, let's go ahead and get the questions going. First question from Aaron S. Has the introduction of Deadeye Division at brutality events worked the way you hoped? Well, this is still a fairly new thing. So for those of you that don't know, we have our brutality matches, which are our competitions we run across the country at different locations. And I have a deep love of Old West and Old West firearms in that time period, as well as I'm a long-time SAS cowboy action shooter. And I wanted to bring that flavor into brutality. So we went and created Deadeye Division, which is exactly that, but it's quite different from other cowboy action style shooting you'll find out in the world, because you don't have to costume, and you could shoot the thing with only one gun. You buy one lever gun and you can shoot Deadeye. But you could also bring a lever gun, a revolver, 2 revolvers, a shotgun, and you can game out how you want to shoot the stage based on where you place the weapons on the stage. Additionally, we're now adding, as of next week, we're running CQB Brutality East, Moonshine Brutality, and we're adding Deadeye Posse, which allows you, with the cost of some planning, to have 2 of you shoot the same stage at the same time in Deadeye. So one person could have a lever gun, and the other person could have a revolver, or one person could have a shotgun, another person could have a lever gun. You could both have lever guns, and we will run you safely, of course, both of you at the same time, and you'll shoot the stage based on whatever equipment you both bring. Because like in the Old West and in modern days, if you're going to a gunfight, bring a friend, and that's what Deadeye Posse is designed to do. So to answer your question, has the introduction of Deadeye Division worked the way you hoped? And I'm going to go ahead and say yes. All these things are slow burns. When we first started brutality matches, they've been growing over time, and it takes time for new ideas to percolate. And Deadeye has actually had more uptake than I legitimately expected. In fact, we have a significant number of people shooting Deadeye and Deadeye Posse at CQB East, Moonshine Brutality coming up. We had some Deadeyes at High Desert, and at CQB West out in Utah, we had a lot of Deadeyes. So based on the percentage of overall attendance, Deadeye definitely represented. So yes, I do think it's going the way I hoped. I just hope to see it grow. My goal would be, if I can do it, I would like to have a Deadeye entirely match, a Deadeye Brutality. Also, I didn't pay for this, but they did send it as support. If you didn't see the video about the 1892 Winchester from Heritage Manufacturing, we ran that gun hard at CQB West, at High Desert Brutality, and it ran great. And those guns are like $500-600. So if you're interested in Deadeye Division, The Heritage Manufacturing 1892 Winchesters can get you in at a really low price. You really only need to buy one gun. The only warning I'm going to have for you is that once you start shooting lever guns and Old West guns, you're going to find yourself buying more of them. So that might sound like a low cost of entry, and it is. And you can shoot our Deadeye divisions with just one lever gun, but you're going to find yourself buying more of them. Bazooka D. You said in a previous Q&A that semi-automatic function trumps intermediate cartridges even at close range engagements. If so, would you rather use a semi-automatic large bore rifle or a bolt-action 5.56 in CQC? I would still rather have a semi-automatic. As I said before, it trumps intermediate cartridges. The minimized recoil of 5.56, but still having to manually cycle a bolt-action is definitely going to put you behind the curve than being able to just pull the trigger again. So, of course, controlling the rifle and proper manipulation of weapon handling and sight picture control, and all that, and recoil management, a large bore rifle that's semi-auto will definitely be something I'd prefer than a bolt-action 5.56. Here's an example. So we're talking about CQC, or close quarters battle, or CQB. I'd rather have an M1 Garand than a bolt-action 5.56. That's not a hard choice at all. Matthew J. You've mentioned your preference for toggle link lever guns and shown some of the malfunctions that occur in some of the Marlin style actions. Would you be willing to go into a little bit more depth about the trade-offs of various actions, Winchester toggle, Browning, Marlin, etc., that you've seen at cowboy events? Yeah, and I'm going to do this in other coming up lever action videos too. So this will be more of a summary than a deep dive. So what it boils down to is this. The Winchester toggle link, which is the 1860 Henry, 1866, and 1873, is the slickest, smoothest, easiest to maintain action you can run. You can take the side plates off as a 73, get in there and clean it. Once you've done a little bit of work or the gun's worn in, it cycles like glass. It's smooth like butter. Also, it has controlled feeding. If you happen to turn the gun upside down, the rounds don't just fall out. The feed angle is almost directly into the chamber with the lifter. Lots and lots of things push me towards the 73 and 66 being the optimal, best lever action design there has been. Now, that being said, that is not a gun that upscales to rifle caliber cartridges or power cartridges, but I don't care. I see a lever gun as a intermediate or pistol caliber, high rate of fire, high capacity gun. That's my personal preference for what lever guns are. So in that regard, the 73, 66, and 60 toggles are the smoothest, easiest to maintain, fastest guns. They're also sufficiently accurate. They don't have any deficiency there as well. But when you go to the 1892, Browning moved away from the toggle link, has locking lugs. That video is up just last week. And you know what? It's not far off. It's almost as fast as a 73 or 66. It's definitely built like a tank. Its feeding angle is a little weird and it can clunk up, and sometimes you'll actually see malfunctions where a round will pop out and when it shouldn't. It doesn't have very good controlled feeding, but you can also get them for like $500. They are lighter and they have less areas for dirt ingress. So there's a trade-off there. The 92 is probably more resilient against dirt and fouling in the field. Its feed angles are weird. It's a little slower, but it's lighter and cheaper in the current market. The Marlins. I have made no qualms about saying I think the Marlin action is a deficient action. I don't like it at all. It does not have controlled feeding. Once a round cycles out of the magazine, if you hold the gun at an angle, the round just falls out of the action. Nothing's controlling that round until it gets into the chamber. That's weird. And part of the problem that is incurred as a result of the feed system in the Marlin is that it will bugger up sometimes and the round won't get into the chamber, and you'll see this like Marlin bobble where it can't, you have to kind of like futz with the lever, and then it lines up and then closes and goes into battery so you can fire it. Additionally, when a Marlin malfunctions, it's a bad deal. If you've ever taken a Marlin apart, it's like taking apart some kind of Swiss watch. And it is not an easy gun to take apart, clean, and repair. And if something goes wrong under the clock, you're probably not fixing it then. You just discard it and move on to something else. the Winchester toggle, the 73-66, you can frequently just like mess with the gun a little bit and get it running again pretty easily, unless it's a catastrophic ammunition issue. The 92 is more reliable than the Marlin. It just is. However, it is also a difficult gun to disassemble and maintain. So if you're dealing with black powder, especially straight wall cartridge black powder like 45 Colt, which has blow-by, meaning that there's going to be black powder fouling to a small degree getting into the action, you really shouldn't mess with anything but a 73 or 66. 73 being the best and easiest to maintain because of the side plates. If you're dealing with smokeless, doesn't matter. If you're dealing with one of the black powder cartridges that seals well, like 44 Winchester centerfire, 4440, then I wouldn't care because it seals so much that the amount of blow-by and fouling getting into the action is so minimal it's irrelevant. But what it boils down to is the 73 and 66s are easy to maintain and deal with, even with black powder. Fastest, smoothest action, more expensive. 92 is a nightmare to maintain. However, you probably won't need to maintain it. The Marlin is a nightmare to maintain, a nightmare for reliability, lack of controlled feeding. Really, the only thing Marlin does well is it ejects out the side instead of out the top. That's about it. I think that's the reason you see the Marlin being the basis of so many modernization projects, because then you can put on your red dot or your optic. But got to be honest with you, I don't care about a red dot or optic on a lever gun. Hopefully that answers the question. It's a lot going on there. Harris 122. Did you ever notice if the adverse gas setting on adjustable gas block guns yielded any better results during mud tests? Also, for historical myth purposes, any chance of doing a mud test with a milled AK, preferably a Type 56? And the reason is the Type 56 would be the one that was in Vietnam. It would be interesting if there's a potential better fit for milled guns and more rounds before it seizes up. Also, a Chinese Type 81 would be an interesting mud test. So, let's address all that. Interestingly, during mud tests, we have gone from standard to adverse and have never seen the adverse setting do a damn thing in the gun running when it wouldn't. Adverse settings are when the gun's a little dirty, or you're dealing, in my opinion, is when the gun's a little dirty, or you're dealing with really bad quality ammunition. It does not make a damn bit of difference when the gun's fouled due to mud ingress. So adverse is just that. You're in an adverse environment, but you're not in a clogged environment. And when mud tests occur, that's, of course, irrelevant to adverse or standard. But we've done that, gone from regular to adverse, or even started on adverse. Didn't make a difference. Not to poo-poo the idea, but a milled AK and a stamped sheet metal AK will be zero difference whatsoever. And to be honest with you, I'm really confused why people think there's a difference there. The original gun, the original 47 was meant to be stamped sheet metal. Manufacturing capabilities meant they had to go back to milled. They milled them for a while and then eventually went back to stamped sheet metal. But the reality is the clearances in the AK, whether it's milled or if it's stamped, are the problem with ingress of dirt and debris and mud. It doesn't matter if it's milled or stamped. There's a lot of open holes in an AK action, especially when it's cycling. And there's a lot of places for it to ingress. And even when the gun is closed and in battery, there's a lot of ingress spots and a lot of really large clearances that people go, well, that's what makes it more reliable. In my opinion, it actually makes it less reliable in direct dirt ingress problems like mud. Maybe the large clearances of an AK help over time in terms of having to maintain it less if it hasn't gotten dirty. But when it gets dirty or you're in a fouled environment, such as a mud pit, we've proven reliably over and over again the AR is the winner. And those open clearances of the AK are actually a detriment of dirt and debris getting in. In fact, I'm at the point now where I can, for the most part, there's exceptions, but for the most part, I look at a gun that's going into a mud test and I'm going to tell you if it can pass or not based on the clearances and ingress points that allow the mud to get in. The goal is to not let the dirt ever get into the system at all. And the AK has tons and tons of places for it to just leak right in, milled or stamped otherwise. Nathan K. I thought I'd sneak in a non-firearms question if you don't mind. I don't mind at all. Any books, music, or TV shows you've recently enjoyed that you would recommend to others? I will tell you that I absolutely loved the reimagining of Interview with the Vampire that was on AMC, Season 1 and Season 2. It is awesome. Like historically, they did a great job recreating the historic French Quarter and Storyville. Well, they filmed in the current French Quarter, but they recreated Storyville, which was the giant red light district just lakeside of the quarter, and it looks like it came right out of a book. Even though, of course, we're dealing with a fantasy environment of vampires, the historicity of the show, based on the topics and areas that they deal with, are superb. And sometimes fiction allows us to address historical realities in a way that historical reality can't. So, in the show in season one, when Louis gets turned into a vampire Lestat by Lestat, he is a person of a mixed race, and also that is an interesting question. A free man of color in Storyville at the time, and working with people. And when he starts to be able to have the ability to read the minds of the people he worked with that he thought were actual what's the word I'm looking for? Were actually people of collaborators and community members. He starts to be able to see the actual racist thoughts they're having about him, and that opens up a whole new door of conversation that wouldn't exist in a non-fiction reality, right? Because you can't read minds in reality. So I've really been I love that show, and I can't wait for season 3, which is now called The Vampire Lestat. But season 1 and season 2 taking place in mostly post World War II Europe, they're just amazing. Love them. It's funny how it can be more historically accurate than a show that's trying to be historically accurate or says that it would be. In terms of music, or guilty pleasures. By the way, I don't believe in guilty pleasures. If you like something, like it. There's no reason to be ashamed of liking something you like. Guilty pleasures are because society's telling you shouldn't like it, and that's silly. If it's something you enjoy, you should enjoy it. Yeah, I really have been enjoying an artist called Scene Queen. She's doing sort of like a new take on metal as a female-led band, and her stuff is dope. Love it a lot. In fact, I just used one of her songs in the promo video for the shirts we just dropped on the short. Scene Queen, really like her a lot. E. Rahya, you have done some videos about derringer type guns, old derringer type guns. What do you think about modern derringer type guns? Well, define derringer, right? That's a tricky one, but I'm going to go ahead and go with a derringer as a single or double shot, double barrel or single barrel, possibly single shot, easily concealable pistol in your pocket. Like you see current manufacturing like Bond Arms, and they have 45 Colt 38 special, all the stuff they're doing. But essentially you cock the hammer, you get one round, you cock the hammer, you get a second one barrel above another, over under sort of thing. The days of the derringer should have been long gone, long time ago. There were pocketable revolvers that existed well within the time derringers were still being used, and they still exist today, J-frames, etc. And you, in the age of things like the Kel-Tec P32 or the Ruger 380s, the LCP, LCP2, the derringer is an artifact of the past that maybe you could have one if you want to just have fun with it. But the idea of a modern derringer for self-defense is absurd. And anyone buying them thinking that's what they're using it for, of course it's possible. And there's probably some weird story about some guy somewhere using one. But the reality is it is a terrible, terrible choice for a self-defense pistol. And unless you just like them because they're cool and fun and you want one for fun, modern derringers are silly. New Englander in Ole Engalia. I've been living in the UK for a few years now. Whatever I mangled right now, I'm sorry. I've been living in the UK for a few years now and picked up shooting air pistols, specifically revolvers, to maintain my fundamentals, safety training, and reloads. I honestly find them enjoyable and much easier to get friends more hesitant of the shooting sports to give it a go. I could see that. People would see air pistols as something different than a real gun, even though air pistols are getting, or air guns are getting, have been for a long time, still viable as actual real guns. I understand why we did not use them in the military. However, I can't understand why air guns were not more prominent when I started to shoot at civilian ranges as a learning tool or introduction to shooting sports. Do you have any thoughts why? Yes, they're not perceived as real guns. Like, gun people want guns, and for the most part, perceive air pistols and air rifles as toys. Now, that's not true. A A lot of the air pistols and air rifles are absolutely not toys. They can be very capable, and even the ones that are not necessarily powerful in terms of energy deployment are excellent training tools for follow through and marksmanship. Just the same way 22 LR or 22 short is. If you want to get really good at precision shooting, air rifle or 22 is the way to do it. Like, it is relatively cheap to shoot, and every fundamental is required to shoot good, tight groups with an air rifle or a 22 at the proper distance. So I think the answer is simply this. They're perceived as toys, even though they're not. And in a place where people can get quote-unquote real guns, they want quote-unquote real guns, not a toy. I think that's as simple as that. It's just bias. Thomas T. What would your ideal home defense gun be, and how would you accessorize it? Kind of a basic question, but I think you have some interesting insight that would be useful to the InRange community. You know, you're going to be bored with my answer. A good semi-automatic shotgun with a red dot and a white light. Boom. Throw some buckshot in that. Have some slugs on the side for something that's inexplicable, and you should be good to go. There's a lot of reasons for this. I don't know how often you watch James Reeves, a friend of mine. He puts out videos that are very interesting in terms of, like, don't put dumb shit on your guns, keep away, don't put a Punisher skull on your gun unless you want to deal with it in court. And coming to a home defense scenario with a submachine gun with 5 lasers on it, a heads-up display, and night vision because someone broke in your front door at 2 in the morning should be fine. I'm not saying it shouldn't be fine. This is not me saying there's anything wrong with that. But legally, it brings up interesting problems and can. And realistically, a proper, reliable shotgun with good ammunition legitimately does take care of almost any home defense issue you might ever encounter. Between good buckshot and good slugs, I don't know what you're going to deal with that you can't deal with. Put a red dot on it so you can at least aim in low light conditions, and a white light to identify what you're aiming at, and you're good to go. I know people talk about AR-15s and all that, and that's not the worst decision either. Maybe you can't handle a full-size shotgun based on your body structure. But for me, a good semi-automatic, reliable shotgun is the way to go. Pumps can be fine too, but train with them so you don't short-stroke the darn things. Philip W. Why haven't other companies made a pistol similar to the HKP7? So if you don't know, HKP7 is a gas-delayed system. It has a piston in the front. Instead of actually the gas causing the gun to open, it actually causes the gun to stay locked longer. It also is referred to as the squeeze cocker. It has a cocking handle in the front of the gun, and unless you have a proper grip, the striker will not drop because it isn't properly cocked. It is a fantastic, amazing, reliable, non-reciprocating, fixed barrel, accurate gun with some deficiencies. It's heavy and it gets hot. Due to the gas system, the gun will heat up and be hard to handle after multiple magazines. Why haven't other companies made them? There have been some. Obviously, the Laoga Alien is a derivative of that. And to a small degree, the Walther CCP was as well, a gas-delayed system. And I was a big fan, and still am actually a fan of the Walther CCP. I like that gun. It means that you don't need very much spring pressure to keep the gun locked, and it makes it much more accessible to people who have maybe low grip strength to be able to cycle the gun. It also means reduced recoil impulse. It's a great design. Why haven't more people made it? I think in the American market, making anything different is bad in terms of actually selling it. Doesn't matter if it's better. Doesn't matter if it's better 7 times to the sun. The reality is if it's different, people don't buy it in this country. And this is predominantly where firearms are sold. I mean, I know there's people in other countries, but this is where the main firearms market is, especially pistols, which are commonly thought of as self-defense devices. Anything different is met with consternation. And it's the same reason you don't see different forms of magazine ejection. So like what I mean by this is you have your mag catch, which is normal thumb mag catch, which is thumb release, which is what we see here. But like the paddle that you see on some of the European guns, or like it can be on the HK VP9, those things I love that. You don't see it because it's different. It might be better, but it's different, and different doesn't sell in the US. And it's also a little bit more expensive to manufacture, and costs have to be pretty much in the US, firearms have to be as cheap as possible for people to want to buy them. And so people will buy lower cost firearms, typically speaking, for lots of reasons. Maybe it's just economic, but there's other reasons too, rather than something that tends to be more expensive, because why? Doug G. In the years you've been on YouTube, do you think this is where the channel will be, and what else would you like to do with the channel? No, I had no idea where this was going to go. First of all, YouTube is a nightmare of shadow banning and all sorts of nonsense and problems. And I did expect YouTube to continuously get worse. I have videos going back now 8 years talking about demonetization of the channel proactively, going to a completely viewer-supported model. I referenced Fahrenheit 451 about YouTube destroying the Library of Alexandria with their burning and purging of content that was previously acceptable and no longer is, and the destruction of knowledge that YouTube was and still is a repository of, although less so every day. What I didn't know, and maybe this was obvious, but I didn't think about it, doing the right thing, which was supporting 2A for all, meaning that these rights exist for all humans regardless of your identity, sexual preference, gender, belief system. That has been more controversial than I even expected. And the amount of vitriol that has come from being what I believe is support of basic human rights, and the turn to malicious, bigoted type people in the firearms community revealing either their true colors or becoming, turned into extremists based on whatever's been going on, or the algorithm feeding them toxic, horrible crap 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, has not been, I knew that was there, but I didn't expect it to be to the level that it's at. So, whoops, but it doesn't matter. I wouldn't have done a thing different, because doing the right thing matters to me more than my YouTube channel. And I appreciate all of you keeping this channel alive regardless of all of that. But no, I didn't. I didn't know that we would land up having to be almost, not entirely, there's a few others, of course, but almost the sole voice of reason in a community that is washed in hatred and bigotry. And that speaks to what needs to change in the firearms community. It also speaks to what the algorithm promotes. Oh, we saw you like racism. Here's some more racist crap. And that sells, and that makes money. And guess what they promote? That. All of this supposed left-leaning media bias is nonsense. The algorithm promotes the most awful stuff reliably in the interest of money. It's not about morals to corporations. It's amoral. It's about making the most ad revenue per minute. And therefore, they promote the rage that people click on and watch and have engagement with that lasts longer than, let's say, a 30-minute video about how an 1892 Winchester works, or a marginalized community defending itself with firearms in the 1890s or 1930s or 1960s for that matter. And so I guess I saw it all coming. It's just worse than I expected it to be. So here we are, and hopefully an island of sanity in a sea of insanity. And hopefully we can find more people like you all that are here watching this today, keeping this thing going, because I appreciate you, and this message to me is important. Bones 870. Always enjoyed the Q&A because I would always try to sneak in a music question, and I love that. What have you been listening to that is new, and what are you listening to that is old? New. Well, I already mentioned one thing. Really been enjoying Scene Queen, even though industrial and rivet head music tends to be my favorite, but really been enjoying that. I've been also, so that I guess would be the new, although relatively new, Scene Queen. Old. This answer is probably going to surprise you and not surprise you. I'm always going back to my old industrial music and really enjoying, of course, Skinny Puppy, etc. But another thing I've been really getting into that's old, in air quotes, is old style New Orleans level jazz. We're talking like 1920s, 1930s, stuff that you would have found on a 78. Really been enjoying a lot of that, and sometimes having that kind of diversity in your audio repertoire is a good thing. So new, Scene Queen. Old, 1920s, 1930s jazz and blues. Maybe that's a surprise. I don't know. But I do like music questions a lot. Also, there's a band from Tucson here called Calexico. They're pretty famous at this point, but they're like my go-to chill. If I want to relax and I want to listen to music that sounds like the desert I'm sitting in, Calexico is a go-to. And I guess I would put that in the sort of old because they've been around a long time. But it's one of my, just I go back to this when I just want to like have some music and not necessarily punch walls or stomp around in stompy boots. Bad luck ace. With the reduction of wait times for NFA items, do you think we'll have a change in the firearm space opinion as a whole, as well as public opinion, to shed more positive light on some of these items? SBR, SBS, and silencers. No, I don't think that the weight change will make a big difference. I think we're going to see more of them. But the reality, the stuff that's been going on with stuff like braces and of that accord are probably having more an effect on proving how dumb the NFA regulations are than not. And I think that more SBRs or SBSs wouldn't change that dialogue. The braces are already changing that dialogue and conversation. There's no equivalent to the brace in the silencer space, so suppressor space. So I don't know. More suppressors out there would help, I guess. But I think public opinion is, I don't know about public opinion. See, that's funny. When you say public, are we talking about gun people? Or are we talking about the public at all? The public at all has been so filled with nonsense about firearms and special things like suppressors for so long that I think it would need a media shift for the public as a whole to see these as a more positive thing. They'd have to be fed by their nightly news, the talking head that spews propaganda at you, that silencers are a good thing for the purposes of hearing safety and people being able to use firearms that otherwise couldn't. But how often do you hear about the positive use of firearms in the media in general? Outside of our chambers that we watch our own stuff that we seek, the media pretty much spews fear. That's what they're good at. That's where the money is. That's where the algorithm is. And fear-mongering about short-barreled rifles and suppressors is far more monetarily rewarding to them than saying, hey, these are actually good safety, pieces of safety equipment. Question 2, any chance of a review on the Hellion? Well, I think we did that when we did the introduction. We're talking about the VHS2. The original Bullpuppalooza was sort of a review of that, and the first time I ever used it was I took it out and I won a match with it. Now, I guess you're right. I should do a more thorough one about it, especially since it's been around for a little while, and I will put that on the list of things to do. Patrick T. Glad to see this back. For my question, what famous gun designer would you want as an ornamental hermit? Well, I mean, I think that's obvious. John Moses Browning. And I think he was kind of a hermit anyway, wasn't he? Anyways, I can't think of a man that would be more interesting to talk to and deal with mechanical problems than John Moses Browning. So, piece of cake answer on that one. Kevin R. Always fun. Q&As are always fun. I like seeing them show up and prioritize listening to them. Also, by the way, I will also publish this in all future Q&As as podcasts, meaning audio-only files on Patreon. So if you want to listen to this just as an MP3 file, it'll be there for you, as well as a video. If you're taking questions again, I have a one-time repeat. What random things have you made on your 3D printer? I've asked this because I've solved random household things almost on a whim. What have I made? I made a part for a car for a friend of mine. I've made some cool, creepy hands to like come out of the wall in my bathroom to scare people with. I've made just cool ornamental stuff, little statues and statuettes. I've made firearms like optics mounts and stuff, but that's not cool household items. What else? Yeah, I think that's it for now, but that's that kind of stuff. Ligma Dragoon. Curious about your thoughts on reloading late black powder early smokeless era cartridges 2520, 3220, 2535, 3855 with smokeless. Not asking about reloading data or anything, just a general idea. Well, there's not a darn thing wrong with reloading any of those cartridges with smokeless as long as the gun you're putting it into is rated for smokeless pressure curves. So those cartridges, some of these cartridges have gone well into the modern era, right? 45 Colt, 4440 or 44 Winchester centerfire, amongst others. Modern reproduction lever guns or whatever, and 45 Colts or 44 or 40 are completely rated to deal with smokeless. So there's no reason to not load smokeless powder as long as you're chambering it in a gun rated for smokeless. The only thing I would be concerned about is if you have historical firearms laying around and you accidentally mix up your smokeless ones with your black powder ones. So make sure that you box them separately and carefully so that you only fire black powder loaded cartridges in your black powder guns and smokeless cartridges in your smokeless guns. And of course, you can still shoot the black powder cartridges in your smokeless rated guns too. So I don't think there's any reason not to. There's nothing wrong with those cartridges moving into smokeless as long as you're putting them in guns rated for smokeless pressure curves. Sparkle Pony. With your extensive experience running so many different systems and matches, have you considered designing your own ideal firearm, whether pistol or rifle, to address the deficiencies you found in other platforms? Yes. And it's called the What Would Stoner Do carbine. I wanted to bring the AR-15 back to its original design goals and use modern materials and make it a lightweight, handy, accurate gun again after it got lost after all these years of being turned into a giant 10-pound massive malignant accessories and heavy barrels. So the answer to that is yes, and that is the What Would Stoner Do carbine. Yeetie, what are your thoughts on 22 trainer guns? Well, actually, to be honest with you, I already had, like the Tippmann M4-22, are they worth it? Do they actually work for training? For example, owning a Glock 19, would a Taurus TX22 be close enough match to be good for training? I'm not really big in the train with this different 22 to think that it's transferring over to your Glock, or train with this different 22 and think it's transferring over to your real M4. Too many things change in terms of recoil, impulse, etc. 22 LR training is good for fundamentals, precision, learning how to be accurate, how to do sight dope like windage, elevation, and for general firearms marksmanship and training, I think 22 is a great training tool for that. This looks like an M4 chambered in 22, so therefore it transfers over to your M4. To me, I mean, all of it comes down to basic fundamentals, but I don't think they directly correlate with a specific handgun. So if you want to train to be generally better with handling and manipulation and manual of arms in terms of just safety and accuracy in shooting pistols, sure, any 22 pistol will give you that, but it won't transfer directly over to your Glock. The marksmanship elements and the basic fundamentals will. Same person, Yee what's your thoughts on the current assault rifle meta? Short stroke gas piston, folding stock. How do they compare to the AR-15? Are the difference between the models actually discernible by the end user? Personally, via photos, I can't tell them apart half the time. I've coined a phrase here on the channel a long time ago: P-mag adapters. Get a P-mag, fill it full of 5.56, and stick it into any black rifle and go. For the most part, all of these differences to me don't mean anything. I don't care. Short stroke, long stroke, DI. I have a preference for DI because it's more simple. It's simpler, lighter weight, and has less reciprocating parts. And that's why the What Would Stoner Do carbine remained a DI, quote-unquote, DI gun. But I think the reality is when you're actually shooting them and using them for what matters, it doesn't make a darn bit of difference. Pick what you like. That's why, to me, they're just doing different. I think you're right. Is this just a case of gun manufacturers using marketing and try and sell something new? Well, if you go on any gun forum and see people arguing about short stroke, long stroke, DI, blah, 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 ad infinitum, and like this is like the Chevy versus Ford stuff. The reality is most of the people, not everyone, so don't take this personally, most of the people sitting on the internet arguing about this would be better off out actually shooting their gun, I don't care what gun it is, and getting better with it than they would arguing about these almost inconsequential differences. D. Lewis would like to get an InRange TV thought on suppressors. Use, application, WWSD pick. I don't really dabble in suppressor land very much. I have a few of them. Years ago, I bought a giant heavy Gemtech Halo because it'll go onto any gun with an A2 style flash hider, and I continue to use it to this day, even though it's heavy and old school. Suppressors are fine. They add weight to the gun. They get hot, and if you drop the sling, they will burn you. Something to think about, even if you're just sticking it back in your case. Obviously, the Noise suppression is good for neighbors, or depending on the environment you're in. They have tactical application in that it makes it much harder for something being shot at to discern the origin of the shot. How much that really matters in most of our worlds is, of course, pretty dubious. However, for the most part, I have them and I don't use them because they're just another thing to hang off the gun, make it heavy, and get in the way. And unless you're doing something like subsonics that are now deprecating the performance of the cartridge, they are not hearing safe. You still have to wear hearing protection. So I would rather just have really good electronic hearing pro than bother with a suppressor myself, personally. I don't have a good pick for you for the what would Stoner do, because I just haven't really focused on them very much, to be honest. I'm sorry, that's probably a little bit of a answer, but I'm not saying you shouldn't have one, and they are courteous to your neighbors. Like I said, there's tactical application, but for the most part, they're just an annoyance, in my opinion. Oh, you know what they are really good at? Night shooting. If you're going to shoot a night match, especially with IR lasers or using any sort of active illumination, white or IR, the suppressor does a great job of removing and diminishing the amount of smoke that gets in the way of your illuminator. That is the most significant application I've seen for a suppressor for me, is night shooting. Greg P. In the arena of 3D printed firearms, as well as CNC milling, the frames are the main focus. Metal parts like springs could be repurposed from other machinery. It is the pressure-bearing items like barrels, bolts, and slides that seem to be difficult items to home manufacture. Are there any advances in home manufacture for these parts? Okay, so I'm not like super deep into the 3D printed circle, but I mean, I do keep in touch and watch things going on. And yes, there are things going on. There are people working on home manufactured of rifle barrels. That's been going on for a while. And there are people learning to make like heavier mass bolts for like direct blowback systems, like something like the P90. So that is happening. The problem is, of course, a PLA printed bolt ain't going to last long, if at all. Pressure-bearing surfaces require a significant amount of strength, and that's why you're seeing them using traditional metallurgy for those elements. I do believe that additive printing, whether it's like, depending on like, we're going to see like, we already are seeing it from larger manufacturers, like additive printing with metals. We're going to see that happening, and we're going to see that come to the home space sooner rather than later. Lucy. Everyone has a few years of match experience, has a pile of equipment collecting dust because we found that it wasn't as helpful as you thought it would. What have you used in the past that you found superfluous? Well, this list goes on and on and on. I got like a crate of that stuff. I'll tell you the thing that I think pops in my head first is vertical foregrips. There was a point where everyone thought vertical foregrips. Everyone had to have a vertical foregrip. You had the AFG or a VFG. You had to have some sort of vertical foregrip on every rifle. Everyone had a vertical foregrip, and then eventually vertical foregrips sort of turned into just like little braces to shove into barricades, and then eventually many of those just went away too. I have a box of vertical foregrip type, like all sorts of vertical foregrips and AFGs that for the most part just lay in the box, and I find them to be just another thing to snag on the gun. So of the thing that I can think of most superfluous, it's the vertical grips that everyone needed. They were the thing for a long time, and now they are no longer the thing. How often do you see them on a gun anymore? Not often. The disaster box. What would you like to see as the next big step in digital night vision? Better low light capability or the extension of secondary capabilities, overlays, ranging, a better target for manufacturers? Well, always better low light capability is going to be there. That's the more you can increase light. What's the word I'm thinking of? Light amplification, the better you're going to be. I would love to see digital night vision surpass like Gen 4 analog, and I think we'll get there with time. I think what I would love to see is the convergence of thermal and light amplification into a single image, or the ability to switch between them. I know some people are doing that, but I'd like to see that to be more the case. I would also love to see some sort of augmented reality element that would require collaboration with the sighting system on the gun that could transmit things like a reticle to your night vision optic. So for imagine. So when you're using an IR laser, what you're doing is seeing and emanating an IR laser that is your aiming device going downrange and pointing at a target. And the reason you do that is so you can see it. but you can do things with it that would be unique. You don't have to necessarily aim traditionally. You can like put it under a barricade or through a slot. As long as the laser can get out and the barrel can get out, you can use it. But of course, that is active transmission of something that someone else could see. Some sort of like AR where the sighting system on the optic is then overlaid onto your digital night vision. It would work as an alternative to an active IR laser with your light amplification, and you could still do the things I was talking about under a barricade through a hole and shoot without actually emanating anything, and you could still be passive. That's what I'd want to see most. RGB. Question to combine my two favorite underrated InRange sections, historical vignettes and cybersecurity. What modern information technology would have benefited a historical rights defending organization from the Underground Railroad through the 1970s and now? Encryption, and of course, end-to-end encryption with cellular communications in which the encryption is employed in a way that no one can get into it because only the two sides have the decryption keys. PGP comes to mind. In fact, Phil Zimmerman, the creator of PGP, created PGP as a tool for human rights purposes. People that were doing data collection and investigations into human rights violations were getting their laptops abducted by warlords or worse and having horrible things happen to them and the people they interviewed based on the data on the laptop. PGP and proper deployment of encryption allowed that data to be secured in a way that even if the laptop was compromised, the data on it wouldn't be, and therefore the sources wouldn't be. So the ability to communicate through a worldwide satellite / cellular network with end-to-end properly deployed encryption changes everything. Imagine if the Underground Railroad could have talked to each other about a depot or a place or a change of path based on enemy positions, how much that could have changed things for people trying to get to Canada to save themselves from the horrors of slavery. But any organization, properly deployed communications, comms, and properly deployed real end-to-end encryption is the big deal there. And it would have helped anyone throughout any time in history in terms of historical rights and a need to be secure and private. Harris 122. Any tips on how to reload current production cartridges efficiently with something like a single-stage press? Any steps you find completely unnecessary or could be truncated? Any specific caliber examples where some steps require less attention, and what are they? And what black powder, these are lots of questions, what black powder calibers do you reload regularly? Single-stage press is what it is. It's a single stage. You have to do everything as a single stage. But what I would do is do everything, each stage all at once. So here's all my resizing, decapping, and priming. Here's my flaring, and then of course powdering, and then all of your bullet seating. Do them. It's like I did 100, then 100, then go to the next stage, then go to the next stage, go to the next stage. The only thing that can be really truncated, in my opinion, is you don't have to go tumbling and cleaning the brass as much as you think. Tumbled brass looks good, but for the most part doesn't matter as much as you think. Caliber specific examples where steps require less or more attention. Well, old school straight wall cartridges are just easier. So 45 Colt, 4570, 38 Special, those old school things are super easy to reload because you don't have to worry about a lot of things. And since the headspace is on the rim of the cartridge, you don't even really generally have to worry about case length. You just have to worry about overall cartridge length. When you're dealing with cartridges that headspace on the mouth, or modern cartridges, of course, with things like shoulders and all that, 223, all that, you have to worry that headspace, like I said, on the mouth. You have to worry about the overall case length, not the cartridge length. So now you got to measure them and make sure they're not stretching and trim them to proper minimum length. Make sure they're not over the maximum length. And resizing and doing all that with those more modern cartridges just require more attention as a result. And what non-black powder cartridges do you reload regularly? None. I don't have the time, nor is it worth my time currently in the market to not just buy bulk 5.56 and 9mm, for example. I reload all my black powder cartridges because the cost equivalent to that is insane. It'll cost me 10 cents to reload a 45 Colt and $1.50 to buy one off the shelf. But when things get silly and the market's crazy, I will typically reload 5.56 and 9mm, although mostly 5.56. Timothy T. What would the lever gun DMR you mentioned long ago have been? I was talking about the 1876, but it would also extend to the 1886. Believe it or not, I did a bunch of that. I came back to it many, many years now. I ran the 1876 as a DMR at High Desert Brutality, and I do have a video coming about that in the future. Would you ever consider revisiting the modernized SKS concept you mentioned a future series on? I don't even remember that, Timothy. That must have been a long time ago. A modernized SKS. I'm not a big fan of the SKS in general, just me. I don't even have one. So let me go ahead and just answer that one with both of these. There is an 1876/1886 DMR discussion to come about the lever gun, and the SKS concept, whatever that was, consider that one dead. Same person. That 8-shot snub-nose 357 you put a video on criticizing semi-recently. In one of your oldest videos, you spoke very positively of it as a carry gun at the time, but in recent videos, some valid criticism expressed a lot of disappointment with it. When do you think your opinion shifted? What turned the tide against it for you? And do you think the niche it once filled for you is still a valid role, or is the concept misguided? I think that technology changed. Like an 8-shot snub nose, relatively lightweight 357 is still bulky and large compared to an equivalent Ruger LCP2 with more rounds of 380 in it. That's semi-automatic with a magazine in another pocket. So smaller, easier to carry, less weight, semi-automatic, higher capabilities makes these old school revolvers, J-frames, 8-shot snub nose become increasingly questionable choices. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I mean, of course, it's going to still, if you do your part, it'll do the job. But it's just easier to carry some of these nice thin guns, like I said, the Ruger LCP2 or others. So in a world where things like that exist, I don't know why you would continue to consider an 8-shot snub nose revolver. Maybe you have a reason. Maybe it's about reliability or something about you've got something there. But in a world where those guns exist, that's where that gun became at one point. This is neat. And when I was talking about it, that was when things like these small 380s and 9mm didn't exist, not like they do now. And now that they do in the year 2024, that snub nose seems like kind of a piece of history to me. Second question. How have you seen your opinions on firearms and politics shift over the last 5 years with the changes in the world? Let's leave the politics one for a future Q&A. That'll be an AMA for everyone. But in terms of firearms, I remember in the 90s there was a general consensus that that firearms rights should be for everyone. And there was it felt like most people were on board with that. And you look back at the old marketing or even people that were part of influencers in the old firearms community of the 90s and early 2000s, and you'll see a lot of that. And now that firearms are being embraced by a larger and more diverse community, both politically and just identity, whatever you want to take from that, race, gender, etc. A lot of people have suddenly have changed, or the general vibe has changed. Oh yeah, we meant that, but not for them. And that wasn't the messaging in the late 90s and early 2000s. And I think a lot of the people from then are still there. But whatever's happened in the zeitgeist of vibes, the hypocrisy of these rights extend to everyone has been terribly exposed, and the community has been corrupted with a significant volume of people that are rights for me, not for thee. And that is very disappointing. Kevin B., you've shown great interest in the Alien universe. Yeah, of course. I love Aliens. I even like Prometheus, and I actually really like Covenant. I think Covenant's very underappreciated. Resurrection's the worst of the series. Romulus was okay. But the question is, have you watched The Expanse? And the answer is, nope, I haven't. I've heard of it, but I haven't watched it. Ryan, I've always enjoyed your Q&As. Thank you, Ryan. I would like your thoughts on continuing support of your channel. Is Patreon the best way? Subscribestar. Ooh, I haven't heard about Subscribestar in a long time. Or another. I keep hearing people grumbling that Patreon is anti-gun. I can't seem to get a clear answer on what they're doing that is anti-gun. I don't know where that comes from, and maybe something's happened I'm not even aware of. But here's what I can tell you. Subscribestar is some weird thing, and I've never been on it and won't be on it. I am on Player, Plauer, and it's fine. But the reality is, of course, I would love more diversity of platforms so that if something did go wrong with Patreon, it wouldn't be just a bucket. And it's not a bucket. There's a few buckets out there. But Patreon is still, honestly, the best way. Patreon's done nothing to me at all. In fact, they've been supportive. My few interactions with them about questions about policy, or even where they found something that may not have been, at least probably their perception, under acceptable policy, which is minor and years ago, they were fine. They came to me and they go, hey, we noticed this kind of isn't copacetic with this particular rule. I went, oh, okay, and it wasn't a big deal, and I changed it. That was the giveaways. We couldn't do giveaways, and it wasn't even their fault. We used to do giveaways in the Q&As, and the reason we couldn't do them anymore is because that was legally somewhere. Someone decided legally that that's considered gambling, and it put them at risk. Patreon, the whole platform. And so we had to stop doing that, and that was fine. I mean, I understood. It wasn't even their fault. But honestly, every time I've had to contact Patreon for tech support or anything, they've been nothing but excellent to work with, easy to work with, responsive, and kind. So, to me, while I don't like having so much in one space, Patreon's been lovely. And the best way to support InRange is Patreon. And the reason for that is it provides me a consistent number for me able to track where finances are at, where support is at, and what I can budget for and what I can't budget for. When something is over there and there's a little bit over there and someone donates something directly, that's all wonderful. Thank you for any of that. But it's not something I can use as a metric to determine what to do with the next month's work on the channel. So the best way to support me directly is via Patreon. And I've said every dollar counts. You can donate directly to info@inrange.tv via PayPal. If you want to just send something like, here's what I would like to do for the year, and here's something, info@inrange.tv, well, that works. But it is easier for me to look at the monthly statistics and data and budget accordingly for the next month's work. And like I said, so far, I have not had a problem. Here's another thing that's, the Q&As have always been a challenge. A lot of these people's names and aliases, I can't pronounce them right. They've corrected me 70,000 times, and I'm still going to get it wrong, so I apologize. Vercingetorix. You know who you are. With the recent leak that confirmed marketing firms are actively listening to cell phone microphones to collect information about everyone all the time, is there anything practical that a regular person should revisit to improve their privacy? These devices are surveillance devices. We kind of knew they were doing this already. One simple thing you can do is not install apps. So let's say you're still using Facebook, because I have to because of InRange. I wouldn't if it wasn't because of InRange. Don't install the Facebook app. Don't use it. Use the web browser on your device. It's sandbox better than the app would be. Don't give apps access to things if you can control it via your operating system. If you're on iOS, you can tell it no microphone, no camera. You can do that to all sorts of apps. It's interesting to note, from what I've been able to tell, TikTok app won't let you really use it unless it gives you constant access to the microphone. That's interesting, isn't it? And the camera, I believe, as well. But other apps will just complain. Like you could use the Facebook app and actively turn off microphone and camera access to it. But the best answer is don't just download all the apps. These apps, the reason they want to give you an app, and I know everyone's been turned into this like app-focused type technology space, but there's a reason they want you to have an app. It's probably not in your interest. So the Facebook app is an example of that. You can use Facebook on your browser. And frankly, there's going to be much better sandboxing on the browser in terms of what you can control in terms of access to your operating system and things like perpetual microphone access than an app you've installed. Now, that's the simple answer. Don't install every app. If you can use your browser, use it. Another thing you could do is not keep the phone with you at all times, or even stick it in a Faraday cage bag, because these things are legitimately surveillance devices. But the last part of this question is the fight so far lost that there's nothing really to do for the regular person. And I think that for the regular person, they're not even asking this question. They're installing the apps, not thinking about it. And for the general populace, the fight is so far lost that there's nothing to do. I think we are in a post-privacy age. except for people who are of the most dedicated effort, and the corporate usurpation of the internet and our daily devices has won. Unless you are actively a hacker-minded person taking precautions directly, or maybe sometimes making a consumer choice on one platform is better than another from a privacy perspective, the regular person is screwed forever on this. But the first simple thing to do is not install apps. Michael H. With the new Turkish bracket cheaper lever guns popping up, have you shot one? And if so, what are your thoughts? No, I haven't. I held one at SHOT Show a couple years back, and it seemed fine. But I just did a video on heritage manufacturing, previously Rossi, and you can get an 1892 for like $500-600. I don't know what the Turkish ones are going for. Are they even cheaper than that? I don't know. My suspicion is they're probably going to be fine, because every Turkish gun we've used on the channel so far has been really good, reliable, well manufactured, and low priced. I mean, look at all the Turkish handguns we did, the 1911, a 2011, and they've all been really, really good. So the Turkish upgrade of their manufacturing capabilities has turned into, plus the economic issues of exchange rate has made Turkish guns extremely cheap and, from my experience, very well manufactured. Now, the politics of Turkey and all that, that's a different issue aside. Jordan S., what is your opinion of the viability of 3D printed firearms, and do you think development in that space will be more reasonable than home CNC machines? I think we're going to see 3D printing turn to materials that are not just polymer, and we're going to see, and I just mentioned this earlier, we're going to see additive printing with some sort of metals in the future, and I think that will be a great difference. I mean, that's going to mostly, not replace, but diminish the need for CNC. Floating Appalachia. Of the Civil War carbines, which is the most interesting to you, and which, in your opinion, was the best for combat use? Honestly, the most interesting is the Maynard, because it's such a simple thing. It's like a barrel that opens up, you stick it around, close it, and fire it. And it's incredibly accurate as a result, and super simple, easy to clean. Nothing can go wrong. Best for combat use? Well, we saw what happened. And they were right. The Spencer. The ability to have a repeating, self-contained cartridge that means projectile, cartridge, and primer, that you just cycle the action, cock the hammer, and fire. That's the best for combat use. Now, you can say the 1860 Henry, but reference the video I did with my buddy Andy. We put the InRange video on Otto and Shea, the guns that killed racists, and that's kind of where we get to. The 1860 Henry is great for specific purposes and if you know what you're doing, but overall, the 1860, the Spencer was the right decision. They made the right call. Mysterious Annelid. Of the rifle caliber Winchester lever guns produced from 1876 to 1895, which one would you most recommend, and for what cartridge if somebody wanted to shoot a wild bunch style at a brutality match? I wouldn't go with an 1876 because it's just a larger 1873 toggle. If you want to go rifle caliber, but I would go with the 1886. And for me, that would be 4570 because it's cool. Now, 1870 does have like a rainbow-like arc, so you'd have to determine that based on what you want from ballistics perspective. But in 1886 in 4570 is just cool as hell. G-Stump. Many Q&A ago, you were asked to recommend one book for your viewers to read, and you suggested Fahrenheit 451. What would be your next recommendation? Boy, that's a hard one. It's like, it should be real easy, but I'm trying to think, like, what would I recommend after that? Obviously, it doesn't have to be science fiction. Parable of the Sower. Parable of the Sower. That's my next recommendation. Clean Sweep. Really like the Q&As. Maybe have them once a quarter. hopefully you watch the intro. Are there any advances in manufacturing outside of filament-based 3D printing that could shake up the firearm? Yes. I'm sorry, I went through this already. I think we're going to see 3D and additive printing using materials other than PLA and polymers. Another question about 3D printed. I'm going to move on. Paul M. What lessons learned from the Ukrainian war do you think find their way into two-gun or other tactical shooting sports? Trench stages, counter drone stages. I don't think there's much there. I think the reality of drones are a real thing, and I don't know how we can integrate them. I mean, you could use clay pigeons, I guess, but nothing. I don't think that goes that way. In fact, I think it goes the other way. I think realistic training and practice and shooting sports that all push the envelope forward in terms of gear, equipment, and challenges actually find themselves into conflict zones, not the other way around. So the stuff that you play around with and test at in places where literally your life isn't on the line allows you to experiment with things in a way that you can't or hopefully don't have to in real life. And I think we actually see it go the other way. Stuff that happens in training, practice, and the sport shooting environment make their way into conflict zones, not generally the other way around. James R. Do flechettes have a better range than pellets from a shotgun? No, my understanding is flechettes are actually a really bad idea. They tried real hard, and they don't work out. Very hard to stabilize, and I don't know if they have better range, but they don't work well. The government tried for a long time. The government tried real hard for a long time to do flechette shotgun stuff, and they gave up. Jane B. What are some big dreams for brutality matches or other competitions you're still hoping to run or see other matches run? If there are gaps the community can help fill. Well, I said earlier I would love to have a Deadeye brutality that's all Deadeye. I would also love to see a cyberpunk-only brutality, cyberpunk brutality, where it's the only cyberpunk division. And in cyberpunk division, I would love to see people using drones to neutralize targets. I would love to see really creative stuff. I'd love to see exoskeletons, all of that. In terms of community, well, there's two right there. I would love to add more like spit and polish to stages with more props, more stuff making it look cooler on video and making the LARP better in that regard. So the other thing that would be helpful is helping us find places that are friendly to the kind of shooting we want to do and to our community to run these events. So if you know a range near you, can't guarantee anything, that would be, you think would be a good fit for the kind of field style stages we run with brutality matches that would also be truly an accepting environment for an inclusive community, let us know. Steve F. What Western film is the most accurate or authentic to the period? Well, there's honestly quite a few, so I'm going to name a few that come to mind, but I'm sure you're going to have some others too. One that really, really struck me was Hostiles. If you haven't seen Hostiles, wow. That thing hit it home. Damn near perfect. While time dilation is an element, the old school Dances with Wolves is phenomenal. Super good. Really good. The Missing. I really love The Missing. That's another one that really hit it home well too. Other ones that come to mind are Lonesome Dove, and that's a great one too. Man. Hostiles really hit it home hard. The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. Superb. You know what's funny is Tombstone, which is not a historically accurate movie, is when it comes to costuming, gear, leather, guns, phenomenal. They nailed it on that. Like flamboyant, expensive, colorful clothing, not gray and drab. And the city didn't look like it was run down. It was a place of money. All of the set and setting of the movie Tombstone and the material culture was excellent. Too bad the movie wasn't better historically, but it's a fun movie, don't get me wrong. But man, I'm going to recommend those for you. I'm going to recommend Hostiles, The Missing. Oh, Appaloosa. That's another one. Good stuff. So Hostiles, Appaloosa, The Missing, the Dances with Wolves, Lonesome Dove. Those are that'll get you going. There's more. Seth H. Why does it seem like all modern tactical lever guns are based on the Marlin? Seems like the 73 or 92 Winchester would make more sense given its reliability and quicker handling. I think it's because they are all hell-bent. I mentioned this earlier. Everyone wanting to make something modern is hell-bent on optics, and the Marlin ejects out the side, and the Winchesters eject out the top. I think it's as simple as that. I don't think these people making modern lever guns know lever guns at all. They just are trying to fill a niche in the market to sell something. They're not lever gun people. And so they see the Marlin, and they're like, oh, we could put an optic on a Marlin. We'll use that. That's it. That's as far as the thought process goes. You know, it'd be interesting is to make a Winchester 73 or 92 that somehow ejected out the side. Now, that would not be a traditional gun. It would have to be modified heavily. But that would be interesting. But that's what it is. It's as simple as that. They're not lever gun people, and they are hell-bent on putting an optic on it. Sean in Cantalupo. How can I improve my pistol shooting with iron sights as a cross-dominant shooter not willing to go left-handed? I don't have a good answer for you besides doing it. Dry fire practice, a 22 will go a long way. I am not a cross-dominant shooter, so I'm not a good one to answer this, but those are my thoughts. I don't know what else to say to that. Bringing the gun in line with the eye that is your dominant eye, you can right? I mean, those are things that cross the mind, but I'm not a cross-dominant shooter. One who seeks 17. I've been slowly trying to upgrade my AR to make it more viable on a modern battlefield. I have a sling, a light, a foregrip. Interesting. I don't think the foregrip matters much. And a red dot. Which will my next upgrade be? Most of these guns are good to go right out of the... You put a red dot on it and a light and you're probably fine. The best thing you can do to make your gun better and make it more within reason is to put in a better fire control group. The trigger press on a quote-unquote mil-spec AR-15 trigger is pretty heavy, and it just makes it harder to do the work it makes the work harder to do. Still can do it, but it's harder. A good trigger, not some lightweight 3-ounce thing, a good trigger that breaks at a reasonable weight will be a big difference for you. And actually, during the What Would Stoner Do project, we standardized on the SLT triggers from KE Arms, not because they were from KE Arms, but because their design and the way the thing works and the cassette is more impervious to dirt and debris. So you get a more reliable trigger that has a better press. Martin M., what was the most uncomfortable firearm you ever used? And what firearm do you want to use but think will be uncomfortable? The most uncomfortable firearm I ever used is easy, the show shot. That thing is, I don't even know how they expect you to use that. That gun kicks you in the face. You can't get on the sights. The recoil impulse is terrible. There's this big metal thing here that wants to hurt you. You have to get in front of it if you don't want to get your cheek broken. Getting on the sights, you can't do it. You're like trying to cant your head and can't get on the sights. The show shot is absolutely horrendous. What would I want to use but think would be uncomfortable? I've never shot an old NGO8 18. Is that what it is? I can't remember that. My brain's evading me. But the lightweight MGO8. I bet that's a nightmare too. JBR. About a year ago, you Van Comped a Maverick 88 and mentioned doing a min-max on that. Is that still happening? Yes. Things take time here at InRange, but I am going to min-max the Mav 88. I think you'll really like it. If you had if you had less than $700 for a pump shotgun, would you go with a gun with chokes, like a 590 model, or a Maverick Van Comped? I would still go with the 590, to be honest with you. Zero Suit Samo. Samo? Seems like most firearms today have narrowed it down to either a DI Stanag rifle or a not a Glock pistol. Do you think we'll ever see major innovation adopted on a widespread scale in the commercial space? The two things that stood out to me as being innovative recently were the ejection port on the original MDR and the Laugo Alien. But the former has been abandoned in the latest model, and the later is unobtainable due to price. Pistol red dots, both in scale of adoption and advancement, and the optics themselves, the only thing I can think of. Actually, on InRange, we said for a long time, the advancements that are going to come in the firearm space are in sighting systems, not guns. The MDR, especially the Wolverine model, even though they've omitted the forward eject thing, is really cool. It's a good, reliable gun. And the forward eject turned out to be somewhat superfluous. It was complicated, caused malfunctions, and the fact is you can still use it on either shoulder, and it still sort of ejects and deflects forward. I think the MDR Wolverine is an innovative gun in the commercial space. The Laogo is too, but we need to see that price reduced. I'm going to go ahead and say this. What would Stoner do is too. Still is. Carbon fiber, monolithic polymer lower. I don't know why it's... I think it still is. I bias and take my bias for what it is. But sighting systems and optics are still it. Green Ruin, where are you finding joy in life at the moment? Well, I've gotten back into cowboy action shooting, and I'm going to try to shoot in the state championships here in Arizona, and I'm really having a lot of fun doing that. Even though it is the 10, 10, and 4, 10 rifle, 10 pistol, 4 shotgun, it's a drag race, it's fun. Being actually competitive at it takes a lot of skill. People look at that and go like, targets are too close. My answer to you is, try it. It's hard, and to be good at it is really hard. It takes a lot of effort. So that's something that's been giving me a lot of joy, actually. Why? A Better Way 2A had Fudbusters on a while ago, and they mentioned the absolute ridiculousness of some of the firearms being produced right now, like odd caliber bolt action pistols, tactical lever gats, and bufferless ARs. Which would you prefer for a sci-fi apocalypse? Same question for mushroom zombies. I mean, you must mean Cordyceps, Last of Us zombies. Odd caliber bolt actions. I would stick with a tactical lever gat because I like lever guns and not very much to go wrong with them. Chris D, are there more black powder videos coming? Always. When was the last one I did? I don't know, but yes, because it's my favorite topic actually. So yes, there will be more black powder coming. Jordan W, what would you highlight as the best reasons for optimism regarding the long-term future of legal firearms ownership? The amount of people that are getting into the space of all walks of life. I've mentioned this over and over again in this Q&A. But the more people that own firearms and are pro-firearms rights, regardless of any other differences you have, the more likelihood we have of preserving these rights for the future. So it doesn't matter what your political differences are on X, Y, Z. If you agree that the right to self-defense and the right to firearms extend to all people, then by the nature of that, more people have firearms, more likely they are to not want to tolerate restrictions against them. Seems like a very simple calculation to me that a lot of people can't seem to do the math on. But that is what I am most optimistic about. Seeing the truly increased diversity of firearms ownership means that we are going to see more people against firearm regulations. Judo Joker, are there any gun adjacent or completely non-gun YouTubers you'd want to do any form of collaboration with, aside from Autun Shea and Robert Evans? You know who would be fun? Tasting History. Max Miller of Tasting History. We've done a few videos on the channel here. I've done a few channels about historic food and such. And if you haven't seen Max Miller's Tasting History, it's very much that idea. And it would be really fun to do something with him, actually. I like his work. I love his channel. He's a real positive dude that brings really cool history to the channel and cool recipes, and I think that'd be a fun collaboration. Carson R. Have you ever considered doing a podcast? I know it's a trope in a saturated market, but I would love to hear you and Russell argue every week about something like a weapon that turned the tide in a so-called Indian war or a crate of guns that would best serve John Brown. No, I don't. You mentioned it already. It's a saturated market. It's like every white dude with a microphone has a podcast now. And no, I'm not interested. That said, I do turn these Q&As into a podcast. So if you are a Patreon supporter, which you are, thank you. And we're going to do these quarterly as AMAs, you will be able to receive them as a podcast quarterly. So maybe my answer is yes, you're going to get a podcast like that because I'm going to open it up to an Ask Me Anything type model for Patreon supporters, and it'll be only for y'all that support me. I might trickle out a few as shorts to promote the idea of coming to support the channel, to be part of that, but the general Q&A will be quarterly AMA only for Patreon supporters, issued in both video and MP3 podcast format. So I guess my answer is sorta, but I don't plan on doing a separate, different podcast. I'm not interested in that. That was all of it. I don't even know how long this was. I think it was pretty long. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you liked seeing a Q&A coming back Thank you for being here. Thank you for keeping this channel alive. And if you want to be part of these future Q&As, please consider supporting me, supporting the project. It's not supporting me, it's supporting a community at this point. We're hopefully doing things that are unique, and we are fiercely inclusive in terms of making sure this is a space that, as long as you're a cool person, you're allowed here regardless of anything else. Just be cool. Real simple. Should be simple. If you like that kind of message and you like what we're doing, every dollar counts. I mean this. I'm going to accept questions at $5 and above going forward, but I will produce it for everyone that is a Patreon supporter, regardless of level. Patreon.com/InRangeTV. Thank you for watching this. Hopefully you enjoyed this, found it interesting, and look forward to talking to you some more. Thanks.